As deep state players and the silent hand of the military-industrial complex push us dangerously close to World War III, military-style drones the size of SUVs have been seen over many sections of the country. The nighttime skies of New Jersey have been particularly busy, with some residents in a near panic. The administration's response has gone from denial to the Pentagon's announcement that the drones are being flown in a legal and lawful manner. So what are those drones looking for? On December 27, 2014, Elizabeth Doherty spoke with Peter Pry, then serving as the executive director of the Nuclear Energy Forum, regarding Russia's live test of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Is a dirty bomb, such as the RS-24, what the drones are looking for? From the Doherty Report archives, here's Elizabeth.
Rare footage of an RS-24 Yars ICBM launch. Although its specifications remain classified, Russian analysts say this system is truly unique. This solid propellant missile is equipped with multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles. Neither Russia nor any other country has similar missile systems to date.
Right now we're talking with Peter Pry. He's the executive director of the Nuclear Strategy Forum. It's a congressional advisory group. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we consider you a friend of the program, and we always like to get your feedback on different news stories. The most recent that we're concerned about is this Russia test of a 10-warhead ballistic missile. Can you tell us a little bit about what this missile is?
Yeah, the press is sort of getting it wrong by representing it as a test of a new ICBM. The SS-24, RS-24, what the Russians call the Yars, and its NATO designation is the SS-27 Mod 2. It's been deployed since 2010. There are about 58 to 60 of these deployed, and it's a solid-fueled missile that carries 10 warheads. Each of the warheads is about 30 times more powerful than the weapon that destroyed Hiroshima.
Wow.
And it's designed to be launched out of a silo or off of a rail car. And compared to our ICBMs, it's certainly new. We haven't built a new ICBM in 30 years. And so the Russians have been developing a whole new generation of both strategic missiles as well as new nuclear weapons to go with them. And it is accurate to call it a flight test. You know, It's not a developmental test. This missile has already been developed. It's one of a whole bunch of new missiles that they've been developing and that they have, in some cases, deployed. And this one is already deployed. Allegedly, it was an operational test. Unlike us, where we will take a missile out of a silo and then launch it from Vandenberg Air Force Base, the Russians will actually do their tests live out of an actual operational silo or off of a rail car. I don't know whether this was launched off a rail car or of a silo, but it was a testing of an already existing deployed missile. But the purpose is obviously not to actually test the reliability of the missile.
Okay.
It was sending a political statement.
Sure.
Because this coincided with Russia's announcement in Moscow of a new military doctrine on Friday, which is also not new, by the way. There was one new wrinkle that they added to it. What made the headlines is that they identify NATO as the enemy, as the top enemy of Russia.
I thought it was going to be something like destruction to America, but I guess that's not new either.
Their military doctrine has, in the aftermath of the Cold War, has actually been even more aggressive than the Soviet doctrine was at identifying us as the enemy and all of that. The one new thing that genuinely is new in the doctrine is they talk about using precision conventional weapons as part of their strategic deterrent. One could argue that that's a good news story because their current doctrine has talked about using nuclear weapons just like conventional weapons, and they basically have lowered the threshold for nuclear use so that under almost any circumstances where the Russian state felt it was at risk in a conflict with NATO, that they let us know loud and clear. They would use nuclear weapons not just in a retaliatory mode, but in a first strike. They would be the first to use them, and they might be the first things that they would use.
Well, how does the U.S. defend against a 10-warhead ballistic missile that can hit targets with that kind of accuracy?
Well, we don't.
We don't.
Unfortunately, the national missile defense that we deployed was deliberately dumbed down so that it could not intercept Russian or Chinese intercontinental ballistic missiles. The Russians and Chinese complained a lot about our deployment of national missile defense, claiming it was going to destabilize the strategic balance and all of that. And so when we were deploying the national missile defense, we said, it's not aimed against you. It can't pose a threat to your forces. We're not deploying enough interceptors, and that is true. We don't have enough interceptors to intercept, hundreds of warheads. And the capabilities of those interceptors, they're not able to intercept warheads of sophisticated design that have spoofing mechanisms, for example, or that are traveling at a high enough velocity so that they could penetrate our national missile defense. Our national missile defense is only designed to deal with crude first-generation missile threats.
Right, somebody shoots off
North Korea or Iran, and that's what it's designed for. So the claim, one of the things that's ballyhooed by the Russians about this ICBM, the RS-24, is that it can penetrate U.S. missile defenses. And they make a big deal about always emphasizing how they can penetrate our missile defenses. Well, our missile defenses aren't designed in the first place to intercept their missiles. I think part of that is an excuse, probably, so that they can develop new technologies that would enable them to execute a surprise nuclear attack more effectively. For instance, they've been working on a maneuverable warhead called a MARV. Some say they've actually deployed it already. And what this does is that as it enters the atmosphere, it can maneuver. The warhead can actually maneuver. And the Russians claim that's to make it harder for us to intercept the warhead. But in the past, the reason you'd have a maneuverable warhead is it gives you cruise missile type accuracy so that there is like zero miss distance, and you can hit the silo right on the lid with a maneuverable warhead. So you go to very low yields if you wanted to, and it greatly increases your confidence of being able to destroy our missile silos.
Isn't that what China just tested?
Yes, China's doing the same thing, and they're using the same justification that it's to get through our missile defenses. When in fact the MARV is actually a highly offensive weapon designed to basically fight and win a nuclear war. Another interesting aspect of this, though, is I think this missile system reflects some of the Russian paranoia. They're really doing what we had planned to do with the Peacekeeper. You may recall back in the height of the Cold War, or at least for us when it was the height of the Cold War, during the Reagan administration, we were planning to deploy a solid-fueled missile that had 10 warheads on it, very much like this new RS-24 that was launched yesterday.
Almost exactly.
And we wanted to put it in a survivable mode. So
right.
We were experimenting with all kinds of survivable modes, and one of the ideas was to do it by rail. Okay. Now we ended up abandoning the Peacekeeper. We don't have any more of them. We dismantled them. But Russians went ahead and deployed their version of the Peacekeeper, which is now mounted both in silos and on a rail mobile system. You go to the rail mobile system if you think that the adversary might launch a first strike. So the Russians clearly do think that the United States and NATO are capable of thinking about making it a nuclear Pearl Harbor against Russia. Obviously, from our perspective, that sounds just completely crazy. But if they are thinking seriously about a nuclear Pearl Harbor against us, then it doesn't seem so crazy. After all, it's just human nature. You tend not to ascribe to your potential adversary greater moral integrity than you yourself have. And if you're thinking about surprise nuclear attacks and first use of nuclear weapons and defeating the other side in a nuclear war, it is just a natural thing to think that your adversary is thinking about doing that too.
Now, what about Egypt? Egypt is now purchasing, it looks like, this same type of technology or something similar so that they can have their own nuclear program. And India, it looks like, is purchasing missiles from Israel. It's like everybody's getting on this. It almost seems like a war footing.
Well, Egypt isn't purchasing anything like the RS-24. I mean, even if Russia were to give them an ICBM of that sophistication, the Egyptians, wouldn't be sophisticated enough to even know what to do with it. As for the Indians, they don't need to purchase missiles from Israel. I have no doubt that they are purchasing technology from Israel to help improve their own. But India is already a nuclear weapons state. They've got nuclear weapons, they've got nuclear missiles, and they actually have the capability to deploy intercontinental nuclear missiles if they want, because they have a very good space program. In fact, they're planning to test MIRV, that is multiple warhead missiles, and they have orbited satellites. They've put satellites up on very heavy satellites that weigh over a ton into Earth orbit, which is the indicator that's usually used about whether you're an intercontinental missile state yet. India has checked that box. I mean, if they want to deploy intercontinental nuclear missiles, they could do it. They've got the technology that they've developed themselves.
Join us for the live feed of Food and Travel Nation with Elizabeth Doherty, now at our new time, Saturday afternoons at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, on foodandtravelnation.com, TalkStream Live, radio.net, and on the Odyssey and TuneIn apps.
I love you guys. Thanks for telling us the truth.
Thanks for listening to Food and Travel Nation with Elizabeth Doherty, the truth about food and travel.